Hey everybody, Christopher Bruce here with King Creative, and we're keeping the conversations going with our COVID conversation series. I'm joined now by one of my good friends all the way down in Costa Rica who got out, well, you could say just in time, and has been down there ever since the whole pandemic has broke out. She is a transformational catalyst. She's a adventurous, she's a mystical creature. She is Monique. How are you? What's happening?
I am awesome. What's happening is I am in a hammock right now.
Okay, now you're just showing off. That's how this is. You're coming right out of the gate. Up, rub it in.
Sorry, we have calls going on at the same time.
Oh, perfect. Well, I tell me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that the hammock is really just the mask for the soul.
Um, it's the blanket for the bathing suit. I think
Oh,
is a little bit more accurate.
okay, fair enough. That's a different terminology completely. I'll have to look that later and see what picture pops up. But the point is, you're down in Costa Rica, right? You kind of went down there for a retreat. Was it a yoga specific retreat, or was it just a movement, exercise, meditation
I
combination?
came I came down for three specific events, two that were back to back, like a week each, and then one that was there was a week lag in between. So I said, you know what, I might as well come to Costa Rica for 5 weeks, and then I'll come back to the States with new stories, with new inspiration, with new ways to help people. So one was a really, really big festival that's fairly well known in the festival community world, called the Envision Festival. It was
Okay,
their 10-year anniversary, so it was about usually 4 days. This time we're doing it for a whole week. It was quite a spectacle and a bit overwhelming for me. Another event, the very first event I was here for, is part of a nonprofit that I come down every year since 2017, and that's an event that we call Camp. So Cooperative Arts Movement Play is the organization, and it's a co-created experience, about 100 to 130 people, where we come together on a private property, and we do movement practices, leadership workshops. Anybody who shows up who happens to be part of the group, if they have
yeah.
something to teach, it's all fair game, and we all work together to create something that will never exist exactly that way again.
So here's a really
Um,
important question: is it cooperative arts movement? What is it again?
Cooperation or cooperative, art,
Yeah,
anything that falls under these headings, movement and
yeah.
play. So
All
camp.
right, so is it cooperative arts movement and play camp, or is it camp cooperative arts movement play? Because it's camp, but
So
which one is it?
it it's confusing. So the organization is called camp. The event is sort of the membership's founding event. It's kind of the way that we raise money for the year to eventually develop into more local projects that will go on throughout the year. So that event is known as Camp. So it's all capitals. Camp is the organization, and the event, we take that and we add camp with small letters because we camp out there. We have composting
Gotcha.
toilets. We're
So
really living in nature.
ultimately, it's cooperative arts movement play camp
Yeah,
then. So it's
yeah.
not the other way around. It's very important. I was curious which one was first. Are we
Yeah,
camping or are we
it's
camping?
It's
Camp.
camp, not camp
Camp,
camp.
camp, camp. So
Yeah.
obviously, so anyway, so you're down there, you're in Costa Rica, you had this plan, you went down, and then the world flipped on its head, and
Hmm.
all this craziness started to happen with COVID-19 and this global pandemic, and clearly a lot of people, especially traveling, stopped, and you sort of decided to stay in Costa Rica, live in this community, and now what, right? So how long have you been there, and what's your plan moving forward? Like, how has this changed things for you?
That's it's a good question because you know this, but anybody watching might not know this. I've been planning to eventually move here, or at least be here more full time than not. The intention was to come for those 5 weeks and then come home and then answer those questions that you just asked. The final event that I was here for was a transformative, inner journey retreat with psychedelic plant medicine, with some people who are extremely trustworthy in holding that experience. And there was a gentleman who's much wiser than myself who I spoke with after the retreat was over, saying, "Oh, yeah, I fly home in a few days." And he looked me in the face and said, "I wouldn't." And it was someone who I really respect, who I've known for a little over a year. And I said, I gotta really sit with why he would tell me that. We talked a little bit, and I thought to myself, okay, the kind of work I do is a lot of groups and one-on-one. It involves, movement. A lot of the majority of how I deliver what I do up to now has been yoga classes, personal training sessions. And it was quite obvious to me that if we were going to shut everything down, I wasn't going to be able to do those things. So would I rather do them in a place where it's cold and I'm not able to do what I enjoy doing for the most part every day with the people I like to do it with? Of course, for me, what's most important is having access to nature and my inner practices. And I looked around and said, I already plan on living here eventually. And there's so much here that's so nurturing and healing. And I noticed that the way the regulations were being put in place, there was much more of a sense of calm, a sense that we don't need to freak out. We don't need to get anxious. We don't need to be in fear. We're going to take these precautions. And I know the locals here, you and I hang out in downtown Wilmington, and also we kind of, for a long time, our stopping grounds were Trolley Square in Wilmington. So, you can use brouhaha as an example. People go to the coffee shop, everybody. I looked around and realized I kind of know a lot of people here. I knew some of the business owners, and they were sharing the regulations that had to be put in place and what they were going to do about it. And it just felt like, what? The safest, smartest thing to do for anyone is just stay put where you are. And I happen to be in a place where I can go and work on a friend's permaculture project, and plant food in the earth, and be a part of the direct community where we can distance from the greater population. It's a smaller population in general. Costa Rica is a small country. In fact, Costa Rica has been commended on how they handled everything with locking stuff down, and has the fewest cases pretty much of anywhere in the world per capita, based on population.
Sure. Yeah.
So they're doing everything right. And frankly, the best thing we can do for our immune system is to take really good care of ourselves, to spend time in nature, to get fresh air. I've not worn a mask yet. Now, there are people who've worn masks, but there's no mandate that I have to. As long as I'm respectful and keep that space and don't, jump into someone else's close field, I'm good. I'm good to come and go as I please.
Yeah, and with you guys down there, obviously, like you said, I mean, it sounds like you made a decision for yourself. I think that's important for all of us to ultimately do, but also considering how that's impacting other people. It wasn't like you just did it because, I just want to be in Costa Rica and I just don't want to wear a mask. That wasn't the motivation. The motivation was, hey, I'm here now. Why add external factors if
like
I
flying,
can
like getting on an
this?
airplane? Yeah.
Yeah, like, I mean, and we all have to make those choices. I mean, some people need to fly for reasons that are obviously unique to them. There may be a very good reason why they have to make that choice, but it is ultimately a choice, and they have to consider the pros and the cons. And if they do need to go and say put themselves in that environment, clearly there at least there should be a good reason as to why they're taking that risk, essentially, right? So
Exactly.
you're in Costa Rica, I'm here in Wilmington, Delaware. Very different worlds at the moment. You're out there, in this beautiful jungle environment, this community of free spirited individuals, and we're in a more urban environment currently in the studio setting, and I'm typically at the studio or I'm at the house, and we're limiting our engagements outside of that, especially with a newborn baby, beautiful baby girl. And that's a blessing in itself, and such a nice healthy distraction with all the things going on. But the reality is, we do need to figure out how we function and move forward and are sustainable in that, because you can't just, it's not a vacation, as you know, even though some would look at where you're at as, oh, wow, she had a perfect scenario. She went to Costa Rica. For many, it is a vacation spot. And for you, it's more than that. It's been a community. It's been a place that's really felt like home, and you've developed great relationships and bonds there. And it just happened to be where you were when this all broke out. So if you were to, I don't know, if you look at that, do you think of this timing as, I mean, who knows? Like, how do you feel about that? I'm just curious where you're gonna kind of take that answer, because I don't want to
Yeah.
over,
Well, I think you know me. You know, you and I have a beautiful friendship that's spanned quite a long time. So I think you have a little bit of a hunch that I never look at something on the surface. And in fact, the person who gave me that little piece of advice, they work deeply with some unseen forces. With some things uh, that really are you can't put into words. Maybe if you sat in deep meditation, or frankly, I mean, being completely upfront, if you've had a powerful orgasm, this place in the world. When someone when a baby is born, right? You have a brand new baby girl, or when there's a death in your family, the gates to something bigger that makes us really question how we've gotten to where we are and where we're going from here. The door is open to that space. And so there is an energetic quality to the geography of Costa Rica, and also some of what's going on here on the land that matters to me a great deal and should matter to everyone, regardless of where you live. So, for instance, there is an organization here called Community Carbon Trees. It's led by a woman named, we call her affectionately Tree Jenny. And she has moved to Costa Rica a number of years ago. She's a former attorney who completely shifted to basically being an ecological superhero. And so she has all of this education on helping people understand why planting trees here and making sure you do it right, making sure you understand what trees you're planting. Will this tree actually make it to a strong maturity? Impact oxygen you breathe where you are in Wilmington, Delaware. And so Costa Rica is a country that a few generations ago was really decimated by fruit trade and fast food meat. A lot of people sold their land, and it was decimated to become cattle ranches. And the government had a part in this, but basically a lot of this place was sacrificed. And what's happened in the last, just decade or two is a lot of expats who've come in. So Costa Rica, I recently learned, is about almost 50-50 people who are native Costa Rican and people who are expats who have chosen to settle here. So it's a really interesting diversity in that way, because there's a lot of people who speak English, but there are still these really rural spaces that are tucked away. Ultimately, what's the most beautiful about that is that there are a lot of people who've gone into an area that's about 30 minutes from here specifically, but pretty much the whole country, taken some of these lands that are dealing with erosion problems and have committed their lives to restoring the land and the permaculture. And one of the best things we can do anywhere in the world, if you have the climate for it, if you can make it grow, is plant food. And specifically fruit farms. If you can have in this climate, in the tropics, a fruit farm, you are doing a world of good for all of us. Most importantly, when you think about the unsustainable systems that are now having a really hard time with this lockdown, pandemic, quarantine, social distancing, any of the terms you want to use, it's really important that we understand how we can reduce some of the middleman, get away from large corporations. What you're doing, having these conversations one-on-one with people, restoring community, and ultimately saying, where's my food going to come from? And have somebody knock on your door and say, hey, I have these potatoes. What do you have? It sounds so hokey, and it sounds so like ancestral,
but
throwback.
It's good though. And it's, like you're talking about something that really does, it's holistic, but it's communal, and it's thoughtful, right? And if you want, I'll send you my address if you want to give her that, so she can plant a tree that specifically sends oxygen right to my door. I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
My baby girl could use some good, fresh, clean air. I'm all about it. Let's have an experiment there. I think that'd be. How long does it take for the air to get to a specific spot in the world? I'm just curious how that works.
That has to do with precipitation and clouds, frankly.
All right. Well, then we'll work on our rain dances in cooperation with. That's something we can do as well. So you just let me know. Give me the
Okay.
the list, and we'll get this thing started. So for you, and just to kind of keep things moving a little bit, obviously from your perspective in Costa Rica, as you're looking at what the US is dealing with, and obviously talking to friends and folks from home, and maybe family in New York and other areas. What are you seeing from your angle, and kind of how this whole thing's been playing out? Because obviously you get a different look at it than those
Yeah.
that are here in the States like we do.
Yeah, I'm doing my best not to have a chip on my shoulder or like a sense of my nose in the air. However, what I am noticing is the people who are navigating this a little bit more easily, who aren't so affected by the depth and power of how challenging this time is, and how arresting it is to our habitual way of being, or again the anxiety and fear that I see when I look on social media. There's so much information, and it seems like people are really in a tense place. The people in my life who I've talked to and in my circles, what I'm noticing is that anyone who has a simpler life, who has had to slow down maybe in the past before this happened, who has any kind of a self-care practice, who is careful about the food that they eat, who spends time moving and doing any of the things that we know we should do. Like I should journal, I should meditate, blah 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 blah. Right? They're not having such a hard time with it. I'm sure that there are the ebbs and flows, there are the momentary day-to-day things, myself included. I'm finding, in fact, that this is a time for really going inward, and again, to take it somewhere a little bit more powerful. Before this all went down, there were a group of people here who had worked to bring some people who are known as mamos, Mammos, from the Sierra Nevada mountains in Colombia. So they are known as the Earth Guardians. They have never been conquered by any army or any religious persecution. So they've lived the same way for a really long time. To become a mamo, you have to go into a cave and meditate for 7 years in silence.
That's a commitment. That's a significant commitment. I don't think many people here in the States are really able to focus for minutes, let alone
Yeah.
7 years. So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And so I'm not purporting anyone needs to do that. What happened was, so think about what it means to take that on. It means that any choice you make and anytime you do open your mouth, it's not something that you just in the moment were like, I feel like doing this. So they came to Costa Rica and they gave a talk, and they shared that they've been meditating and getting a message from something higher than us all to come to Costa Rica for 50 years at this time, at this moment in time. And this was about 2 weeks before everything happened, where everybody went, we gotta lock this down. And they said the key is that everyone needs to become and embody more tranquilo, 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 which means calm. And if you look at what's going on with conspiracy theories or politics, that's nothing new. It's just that we're all in this together, finally paying attention to one specific topic. It's so much of discord and fear and anxiety and these energies of, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, let me try to do more. Let me think about more. Let me look at more. And really what this is an opportunity for, as uncomfortable as it may feel, is to really pull everything back to the studs and say, how do I want my life to look? Regardless of the external regulations and the things that we don't necessarily have immediate control over. We might have a say in it. We might have the ability to vote some politician into place, or say, I refuse to do that, or protest, which everybody has their own opinions about that.
Yeah, but simplify, right? To look in and really focus on the things that genuinely matter. And I think we cut a lot of the extra stuff out. And it's interesting. I mean, you've been talking about in this tribe. I think that's really impressive and interesting. And they probably have zero impulse, because you can't, even if you had an impulse, it wouldn't go into effect for 7 years. So that's hard, right? But the idea is they're very purposeful in their in their being, in their way of life, and therefore what they do and the choices they make are truly those that are motivated by things that genuinely matter. And they're
Yeah.
not just going to do whatever because whatever. That's not it. It's not, they've just eliminated that. They simplified their existence in a way that's really sounds very beautiful. And there is like, there's peace in that, right? There's peace in doing things because it matters, and having intent. And that's really a cool thing to kind of take and hear. And I think that's what a lot of people are in search of. They're in search of purpose, right? And living purposeful lives. But we get lost in the day to day, I don't want to say nonsense, but the things that, when you really are pushed against the wall, and if you're to be honest with yourself, you're like, does that really matter?
Hmm.
And we get lost in these superficial thoughts. We get lost in caring about these extra things that, if we were to eliminate, don't really genuinely have any impact on our happiness. And therefore, why are we allowing it to take up time and or space in our lives?
Hmm. Yeah, that's so well said. And again, it's something that the way that we live purposefully is it's it comes down to a simple statement. Either everything you do matters or it doesn't. And so, I'm watching how many, restaurants are struggling, and then they're trying to adapt to do takeout in the States. I'm paying attention.
Oh yeah.
And recently there was one restaurant that announced, we're shutting our doors. That's it. We can't do it. They were a small place. They couldn't accommodate this kind of, this sort of system that we had in place that doesn't have a fail safe. And of course, the part of me that knows them and appreciates what they've created, there's a little bit of a mourning that needs to happen there. There's a sadness. And on the flip side, it's, why are we so dependent on restaurants? Why are we so dependent on conveniences? And so
Hmm.
much of it is, we've gotten to the point where even cooking our own meal feels like a burden. It feels overwhelming. It feels difficult. We don't know how to cook. We don't like the flavors. And how did we get there? So that's just one example of things that, even how we prepare our food matters, where it comes from matters, and the
Yeah.
sustainability of that practice.
Yeah, I think that for many in the States, we've kind of gravitated to a life of convenience. And through that, we've lost appreciation for those things
Yeah.
because we take it for granted. It's there. You can just go down the street, get a meal, get a drink, get a whatever, right? And it's just right there. So you don't have to think about it. You can just kind of count on it. Same thing with our phones and all the technology and all the other things that are a part of our lives. So when you are forced now to go back and don't have the access that you used to, and things become less convenient, you start to have to reevaluate those things again, and in a way that you haven't in a long time. So I think that's what we're finding. I think that one of the things that, even through these video chats, and the one good thing about the technology is that we are reconnecting, even despite it being through a screen, with people. And you're seeing them, you're hearing them, you're getting at least the body language is coming through. It's not the same. Obviously, it's better to be in person, and you can't replace that connection, but it is better than not texting someone, not calling someone, which is really a thing I think we're all guilty of. And these conveniences were nice, and exactly that, convenient, aren't necessarily helping enrich our lives. In fact, in a lot of ways, they're doing the opposite.
Yeah.
And I love the point you made about making a meal, knowing how to cook, and as a family, or even as an individual, just going through that process of preparing something, and taking that time and that giving that energy towards preparing a meal is a beautiful thing, and you appreciate it that much more because you made it. And you, I think, have a better understanding and appreciation for those ingredients that went into making the meal, and you're more mindful. And I think a lot of times eat healthier, eat better, and your body appreciates it as well, right? So mindless eating is a big problem. I think it's a thing that you sit there and you're not even thinking about it. You're just snacking away, or you're just distracted while eating. And that's a big reason why I think a lot of people struggle with, health issues and weight related issues. And you're somebody that deals with a lot of individuals on a health basis. I'm sure that's something that you can speak more eloquently and more educated on. But I love that idea of just bringing things back to a better, more mindful place.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because that word convenient.
Mm,
Why do we need it to be convenient? What are we hurtling toward? What is this haste we're always in? That's so much of the world that right now so many people are feeling this sense that the brakes just screeched everything to a halt. And a lot of people are saying, "Oh, I want to get back to normal." Well, which normal?
well,
Because there
sure,
was a time in our
normal.
lives, right? There was a time in our lives, or in maybe our parents or our grandparents' lives, when normal was sitting down to dinner every night, or
Yeah.
normal was, watching the sunset. And
H-
I ask these questions so often.
How about we don't
It
go try to fight for normal? Let's fight for happy.
And honestly, I I'm gonna take it a step more challenging than that. Also, because so many people now are confined to their homes for the most part. Maybe with proper social distancing, they're able to get out and go for a walk or go to the park or something. But for the most part, people are being confronted with being in close quarters with people who maybe they both went to work, if it was a spousal situation, or roommates, or kids are being homeschooled, and people are really challenged right now. There's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff that we
Stressful.
could it's stressful, but it's partly stressful because there are a lot of unconfronted inner voices, and maybe even things that have been unresolved in someone's selfhood or psyche or heart, that now we can't look away. And so someone else who I find to be quite inspiring and very much more wise than myself, a former anthropologist turned shaman who also works with some of these plants that are super powerful teachers. We had a Zoom call shortly after the very beginning of quarantine, and she gave us a piece of advice that those of us on this call obviously had experience with, which is that when you go into a plant medicine ceremony, there are certain rules of engagement and orientation. And a couple of them are, when you feel anxiety or fear, when you're starting to feel overwhelmed, come back to your breath. And that anything that you're experiencing is for you to experience. So anybody who has worked in these ways, we have practice with what she calls the ceremony of your life. And basically every moment of our lives, whether we're cooking a meal or we're going to a drive-through, it's your life. This moment is your life. And can you live it with a sense of, I'm willing to receive all that this moment entails, good, bad, or ugly. So not striving per se for happiness, but striving for a sense of mastery, of willingness, of reacquainting yourself with where you are an autonomous sovereign being and have a responsibility to show up to yourself and then maybe to others.
Yeah. And, I think some of that comes from being more secure in who you are, being comfortable, being content. These are words they're all used, but I think a lot of this comes from people's insecurities, right? Like us, like suppressing certain, like you alluded to it a little bit, right? You talked about how a lot of these relationships are now stress, and I've talked about this in other episodes, because we are confined in a way that we haven't been. And we've even talked about how possibly some of those relationships were going to possibly be forced to own up to the reality of really that maybe they aren't as compatible as they thought for whatever reason. And those could be people that are looking to get married that maybe never will, or those that have been and now have fallen apart, or whatever it is. But just being real and genuine and owning your true emotions and your feelings, and in addressing it in a way that I think has that intent. And that's important. I think, and a lot of that stuff, just being comfortable and in owning your fears, or owning whatever it is that makes you you, and being okay with it, being secure in that, and being happy with yourself is a big step. And I think a lot of stuff we're seeing online, I think a lot of the conversations that are getting out of hand, so to speak, or get really combative on social media stem from a lot of those insecurities. And it seems to me, and I don't understand why, I personally don't understand why people engage in those kinds of conversations. I just don't see the value in trying. I don't know, it's like you're trying to purposely stir a pot or just get under somebody's skin. And I don't, I personally, I've never been somebody that enjoys that, or wants to push somebody that way. I would much rather help somebody, build somebody up, understand the situation, as opposed to just sort of push my agenda. Or I mean, even that, even saying that in a way is somewhat, like, so it's, you can't win there, right? So I think, what do we learn from all this, right? So from your perspective, what is it we take away? What do we do better, right? As humans, and moving forward, what is the thing that we challenge ourselves with, and in being better, not just for ourselves but for others?
A few things come to mind. Number one, what you shared about seeing how people are engaging with each other. It's amusing to me that anyone would think that that's somehow new. That we're just seeing ourselves, right? The whole world is finally getting to look at our stuff, and it really comes down to this. I'll use the analogy of a junk closet. You know, eh, we've always, everybody has the junk drawer or the junk closet, and it can be expanded to mean whatever you want it to mean. It could be just life clutter. It
Hmm.
could be inner turmoil. It could be unexpressed dreams, giving up on something that really mattered to you because you chose that. And we just keep putting it in a closet and putting it in a closet and putting it in a closet. But we all know what happens when you one day open the door to that closet. It all comes dumping out and you can't ignore it anymore. That's where we are right now. On a certain global stage, we're really seeing that every way we've chosen to live our lives, there is not any lack of consequence. Um, it really comes down to nature knows best. So the beauty in nature is what's supposed to die dies. And again, this is not any lack of compassion for anyone who is connected to this virus, who is suffering or has
Of
had
course.
someone suffer.
Yeah.
Um, it's a truth, though, that we live in a culture that tries to deny the reality of death or distract from it. One of the reasons people are so
Mm.
frustrated with not going to sporting events right now is because this constant stimulation of television, of alcohol, of sporting events, whatever you want to put it, fill in the blank.
It's one of the most healthy, or like, people, is it's one of their most counted on distractions. It's one of their outlets.
Yeah,
They've utilized that outlet for so long and really relied on it.
yeah. So we are all right in this beautiful like moment of like a funeral ceremony together, where we get to choose if we want to maybe mourn anything for our personal selves that has not served us up to now. So, for example, people who are maybe living in a state of, oh, I don't want to get the virus, right? Let's use that as an example. Well, really look at your life. Are you eating the healthiest food you can? Are you practicing the things that will truly allow your immune system to either
Mm.
fight something or not get it in the first place? And the reality of a virus is it is the same as us. It is a living being that really a virus doesn't want to destroy its host because it needs to live off of it. So if we remember that we're not special because we're at the top of the food chain, and acknowledge that this life is fleeting. Am I choosing what I really feel is the best that I can? And acknowledging when I screw up that I didn't do the best, and really just forgiving ourselves and being in compassion for ourselves. To speak specifically to your example of people online, starting these digs at each other and just
Yeah.
escalating things. that comes from a lack of self-compassion, because I can't treat you any way I don't treat myself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
so
agree with that.
I challenge people to really honor the difficult emotions right now. Honor in themselves that this might be scary or difficult or bring up sadness, and leave some space at the table for that friend. These are the emotions we've denied so much in the name of only happiness,
Right.
right? Like, oh, you don't want to hang around people who are not in a good mood. And having some compassion for the fact that we are all going through this together, and everybody might be at different levels of suffering or lack thereof. I'm going through it too. I've had really deep moments of emotion moving through that initially I didn't even attribute to what that was. Yeah, I thought, oh, why am I having such a hard day today? It's sunny out. I went for a walk. What's wrong? And it wasn't until I just let myself feel it, not identify with it, not define myself by it. And I'm seeing that is really the people I know who have some practice with that. That's the challenge, is can you feel what you're feeling and not let it drive your behavior, not let
Yeah.
it be something you react to, but something you slow down and acknowledge. Take a breath, really connect, and be in nature. I challenge everyone, even if you can't get out directly into nature, have some sort of nature that you bring into your field, whether it's a visualization or, a glass of water, even just connecting to the things that we're all made of, because we we only have water, air, food, community, ideally touch. So maybe some of us are not getting touch. Touch yourself, right? Reconnect with the person in the mirror. Reconnect with the person who's you're hearing their voice in your head all day.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
like that. So, lot to think about for everyone listening, watching, and for you in Costa Rica, I want to thank you for coming on, for making some time, sharing your perspective, and allowing me to get into nature a little bit by just seeing the beautiful area in which you're hanging out in behind you. So that's a beautiful thing. Maybe someday I'll be able to head down there and check it out myself. Obviously, whenever you're able to come back, and I know you will someday, eventually, perhaps come to Wilmington. That would be lovely. But stay safe, everybody at home. So many great words. How do people follow? I know you're doing a lot of little content pieces. You're sharing things. We need to kind of wrap this up. But how do they find you online? How do they follow what you're doing? I know that through Studio Nurture, there's some opportunity, but individually, you've got some things going on as well. What
Yeah.
is that? What's the best way for people to
So
connect
the
with you?
best way is either through Facebook, which is Monique Claudio, my normal name, and anybody who's connected to you, they can find
Yeah.
me through you. And then if anybody wants to contact me directly, in fact, I would like to take on a few clients while I'm here. And I'm doing some empowerment coaching. These are some things that I'm uniquely equipped to help people in this time with regaining a connection to these practices. And I have the ability to work from where I'm at. So if people want to contact me directly, that's really kind of where I'm going with it. No middleman. Let's just get down to it. Let's just get real.
There it is. Well, appreciate it again. Let's all get real. I think we need to be real with ourselves, and I think we need to be real with each other as we continue to move forward and work hard on finding ways to put ourselves in better positions tomorrow than we are today. It's important to look in to be able to do that. And Monique, thank you so much for all your perspective and your insight and in those kind words and thoughtful phrasing and everything we talked about just now. All right, guys, as always, stay awesome, stay healthy, and stay connected. This was another episode of COVID Conversations.